Our next speaker is Robyn Quinn, and her talk is called Poetry in Motion, the Transit Hero.
Sorry, I had to have heroic music. And if anybody's a Goonies fan, that's the best heroic movie ever. So, I just want to point out that I'm going to be talking about transit. So there's kind of a nice fit. I want to have a T-shirt that says "I rode the nowhere to nowhere model." I want that. Yeah, starting it off with being a transit hero. Well, one of the things that I looked at was the role of poetry. And from early days, poetry was the way that tales of adventure and those larger-than-life figures were made accessible to ordinary people who could sort of see themselves in those roles and celebrate that kind of heroism. Today, we're still dreaming about being a hero. I think most of us enjoy watching shows about, superhuman strength, or in the case of 24, someone who's just like can't get a break. And maybe not the kind of hero in tights, but I think we'd like to be something better or more than what we are. And not in a bad way, not in a self-esteem meltdown way, but in a, like, I envision that I can do something, that I can make a difference. About poetry, now it has a PR problem because, it just has this kind of a different perception for a lot of people. Everybody sees it in a different way. They sort of impose their own personalities on what poetry should be. My first literary crush was on a guy named Edgar Allan Poe. Yeah, you know the guy. The one with the big opium eyes and the hypnotic stare. And he basically was pretty creepy, but I loved him. And after reading The Raven, I was so inspired I had to write an epic poem of my own, and it turned out to be The Red Death. And it was filled with seriously depressing themes and shadows and furrowed brows and lots of feverish eyes. And it was a masterpiece, but I was 10 years old, so what do I know? But I didn't read and I didn't write poetry. If poetry were my PR client, I'd say, hey, let's get some, tough here. Let's hitch our wagon to some cool people and start promoting poetry. You can have a poetry reading with every celebrity I could afford to buy, and then, the shelves would be emptied of Walt Whitman and T.S. Eliot. In a perfect world, I call that the People magazine approach to PR, or cultural enrichment through PR. Maybe not, but if you ask someone on the street, though, about their favorite poet or poem, you'll get the deer in the headlights kind of response. If you ask them about their favorite song or their favorite lyrics or the genre of music that they really, that really resonates for them, they're very quick to tell you, they can recite lines from a song that, has meant something to them, that has, touched their heart or touched their soul. And everyone has that experience. So the way I look at poetry is it could be best serving you when you consume it in small bites. Never, ever, ever with that kind of package warning that reading poetry will make you a better person, or memorize this poem and you will get the, you'll know the meaning of it, and meaning schmeaning. It's like poetry to me is very personal. If I read a poem, sometimes I get it, sometimes I don't. Often when I hear a poem performed by the person who wrote it, I get it. And then it has more meaning to me. I love to hear the language. I love to hear the way that they can craft and use words and cadence to make a difference. So it's not just that surface kind of appearance of poetry, but it's something, sometimes they want to make you connect with them. Sometimes they want to make you uncomfortable, and actually that's fine too. I had a couple of favorite quotes here, but I'm not going to do those until the end if we have some time. Well, except for one, which was John Lennon and Yoko Ono, was all we are saying is give peace a chance, which I love, and it's very, you know, current poetry, but people think, well, it's a song lyric. So getting to the practical side of things, I work in marketing communications. I've also worked in the arts, and one of the things about ideas themselves is making connections between themes, between people, between goals and objectives, between perceptions and lifestyles that you don't ordinarily make those connections. So I always used to think of myself as a matchmaker. I would say to someone, oh, what are you working on? They'd say this and that, and I'd say, oh, you should talk to so-and-so, because they just finished this project and they'd probably be able to give you an insight. So with transit, they came to me and they said, we have a budget, we have a lot of small communities that have public transit, but we don't spend any money advertising, and we don't spend a lot of money reaching out to the community, either the riders or the potential riders. We'd like to be able to get a message out to them about how public transit has evolved and actually matches a lot of their lifestyle choices with environmental concerns and cares. How do we do that without getting all preachy? So I sat down and I thought about it, and worked with them on some campaigns on community outreach, but one of the things that we talked about was they wanted to do a fairly massive radio campaign, because it was one of the good ways to reach these little tiny, what they call repeater communities, where they have like 2 buses, and that's their scheduled service. So they don't get a lot of advertising budget. So we talked about radio. They wanted to do a jingle. Really? A jingle? Like, it's not the, like, this isn't Mad Men. We're not going to do like a snappy 60s style jingle and get everybody all excited about public transit. I mean, we had a real challenge. We needed to take a look at how we could possibly change the dominant perception of public transit is losers take the bus. That's not true. I take the bus.
I take the bus too.
There you go. I'm backed up. But what we had was that challenge of how do we do that in a way that kind of makes connections, makes personal connections with people who are in the communities that the transit service is working in. Anyway, what we did was take a look at the jingle, and I said, all right, fine, I'll go with you, but maybe we can have something inventive with the writing. The first 2 or 3 versions were just awful. And I said, can we take a break? And it just so happened to coincide with the Olympics. Yay! So, going back, now let's rewind. Back in November, I had gone to see a poet read at Hillside at the Black Stilt. And he just impressed me so much, and he was so happy about what he was doing. I think he's one of the few poets that I know that actually he makes a living. That's what he does for his living. Has a house down the road from his grandmother in Penticton. He makes a living as a poet, and his name is Shane Poisan. So, fast forward again to the Olympics. At the opening ceremonies, Shane was performing a work that he was commissioned. He was commissioned to write a poem about Canada in 2007 called We Are More. He performed that at the Olympics. When I watched him during the ceremony, the hair stood up on the back of my neck, and I went, oh my God, that's it. That's the connection. That's the person that can make what we want to say mean something to the people that we're trying to talk to. So what I did first was, and talking about transit heroes, it has a bigger meaning because it actually covers the folks at BC Transit who made the decision. When I asked them, I said, would you like to take a chance and hire a slam poet to write a radio spot for us? And the emphasis will not be on BC Transit. We will have a tagline at the end. That's it. And we can give him a briefing that says this is what we'd like. And lucky for me, they saw him at the Olympics. They loved him too. They loved him too, and they said, really? Yeah, like, okay then, let's do this. So they were brave. And I called Shane. I told him I'd met him. He said, okay, call my agent. Here's her number. I'm interested, because I gave him a quick overview. sent over the briefing. Now this all happened in late March and our campaign was supposed to start end of April. So he actually, after the briefing, produced 2 drafts. The second one was perfect. We flew him over on Helijet because I said, what would make you happy? He said, if I didn't have to travel any more than I have to. I said, okay, we're going to get you over here in a hurry. We went to a studio out in Langford. We did 2 takes, and we had 2 30-second spots and a 60-second spot from the same poem that he did. He's the consummate performer and professional. And he's a sweet man. And he had a personal commitment to the cause. He really did feel that people were not understanding the importance of public transit and how it could really help their communities. And not just in the environmental sense, but in keeping them together and creating a sense of community. So he did the spot, and I'm throwing myself off there. But one of the, the internal benefits too, I'll just very quickly say, one of the spin-off benefits of this was BC Transit was also having trouble with their internal communications, with the morale and the sort of corporate culture that wasn't sort of resonating with their own employees about who they were and who they could be proud of. This particular campaign created a huge positive response with employees. So without further ado, I'd like you to listen to Shane's poem. We're high tech.
You don't need to be bulletproof to be a hero. You don't need a cape to save tomorrow. You can leap tall curbs in a single stride, ride buses that maybe aren't more powerful than a locomotive, but public transit is a clean air incentive that will get you from A to B safely. Every city has a heart, and it's time we start stopping. We've been clogging up the arteries with pollution, but it's a new age. So gauge your commitment to tomorrow by how many steps you take today. The only way to make a difference with a choice. So let your footfalls on the sidewalk be the voice that declares that there's a whole world who shares your concern. Let us learn to love the world once more. Put your best foot forward. Walk or run, skate, bike or bus. If you carpool, do it minus a single empty seat. If you feel inclined to skip down the street, we may point and laugh, but only because that's amazing.